morning. My name is Salvador Berdún. I'm prison officer and I'm researcher at the main Spanish officer prisons trade union, ACAIP. My aim today is to try to explain you the situation about the question of the radicalization processes inside the Spanish prisons and the challenges that we are going to face in the near future. In Spain, we have a long experience of several decades in dealing with inmates linked to terrorist activities, but it was mainly in relation with the ETA terrorist group, Euskadi Askatasuna, Euskadi and Freedom in English, and the ACAIP group of resistance anti-fascist 1st of October, which was a terrorist Maoist group. But in these cases, we are talking about classical terrorist organization with hierarchical structure and a national agenda. In the case of ETA and GRAPO, in both cases, we are talking about organizations with very well defined structures which have their reflex inside the prisons. For example, it was a typical feature of this kind of organization that the inmates that belong to these terrorist groups wanted to be acknowledged as political prisoners because they believe that this would give to them some advantage in their relation with the penitentiary authority. In the case of ETA, the structures range from the level of the prisons to the entire penitentiary system. When we are talking about the structures inside the prison, we can see that in every prison there was a responsible, in the Basque language, arduradunak, a responsible of the group in every prison, and a jail assembly. On the other hand, inside the prisons there was a political directorate and two advisory groups. From the other hand, there was an external structure that gave support to the inmates of the organization inside the prisons, and which was dependent directly of the terrorist organization. So, as you can see in the slide, dependent of ETA, we can see the front of jails, and the Herida organization, which was the responsible of the support to the inmates from the legal, social, economical point of view. Herida was the structure, and inside Herida we can find the lawyers collective, BL, which gave legal support to the inmates and took the orders of the political directorate to the prisons. Heidi Hadi gave social support to the members, and Echerat was in charge of the support to the inmates' relatives, and this was very important because the question was to maintain to the families in the official line of the bank. This, of course, cost a lot of money. Some sources talk about 3 million euros of budget for every year. And for example, in the Spanish prisons, every inmate of ETA received 150 euros every month. It was a lot of money every year. This was our background, and then in the middle of the 90s, the jihadist phenomenon arrived to Spain. in 1995, the police detained to the first the jihadist terrorist in Spain, in Barcelona, and in 1997 the police broke up a structure linked to the Islamic armed group, the Algerian GIA, in the region of Valencia, which was in charge of logistical support to the European networks of the Islamic armed group. The profile of the jihadist inmates linked to terrorist activities was completely different. This was something very new, a phenomenon completely new for us, because the behavior of the jihadist inmates inside the prisons was completely different. Usually, the jihadist inmates have a fairly open and relaxed attitude toward the prison staff and toward the officers who are in charge of their surveillance. They don't ask for any kind of acknowledge as inmates, as political inmates or religious inmates, and this supposes that in many times they don't want to be different from the rest of the inmates population. It is usual that they deny that they belong to any type of terrorist organization, and even sometimes they told to the officers that it is some kind of set of policy set. In this sense, it's very easy for, in the opinion of the officers which are in real contact with them, it's very easy to deal with them, and they are very different from the ATA inmates because they don't have the same support than the ATA inmates. The ATA inmates have a strong support from outside that led to receive visits from their relatives, to have money for to buy goods in the prison shops, and to receive a very good legal assistance. On the other hand, the economical situation of the jihadist inmates is more precarious as it is for their families, and this supposes that they are less likely to receive visits from their families, or even their legal assistance is going to be worse than the ETA inmates. Because when we are talking about jihadist inmates, we are not talking about an homogeneous collective, as it was in the case of ETA inmates. And this is the result of the organizational structures that this kind of terrorism adopts abroad. If we go over the operations carried out by the Spanish security force against terrorism linked to jihadism in Spain in the year 2016, with the data of the Spanish Department of Homeland Security, the police carried out 24 operations, and in many of them we can find only one or two details. This translated into the penitentiary environment suppose that we have a larger number of inmates linked to an ideology, but not linked to the same structure, not linked to each other. The only case in which we can speak of a network with a notorious number of members, it was the case of the Nova operation in 2005. Because there is a tendency, when we talking about radicalization processes inside the prison, or about groups linked to jihadism inside prisons, there is a tendency to think about big networks. That is not the real tendency. If we go over the operations carried out by the police inside the Spanish prisons, and that suppose the opening of legal judiciary proceedings by the Spanish National Court, only in one of the 5 cases in 20 years we can talk about a network. In this case, then the Nova network was essentially an informal structure that was born like a group of buddies that met in the same place and the same time in the Spanish prison of Topas, and that evolved from an informal structure to a formal structure, but only with a few features of a formal and a permanent structure. This network grew very fast and died very fast. Here you can see in this slide a visual description of the Nova network, and this was something very new for the Spanish law enforcement agencies and for the Spanish prison authorities, because we are not talking about part of a bigger structure. This is not a jail assembly, this is not a little part of the front of prisons, or the prison's front in the case of ETA. We are talking about a group that that was born inside a prison, grew up inside a prison, and that was broken up inside the prisons. So there is a particular structure, and all the inmates are linked to each other directly or indirectly. This is going. This is a thing, a type of a structure that is going to be very difficult to find again, because it's a unique case. So it is going to be very difficult to build a new structure like this. This structure supposes a huge effort of the members, because if we think about the communications between the members, if we think about the evolution of the network, we are talking about behaviors that are going to call the attention of the authorities, and the tendency is to try not to attract the attention. In this case, we are talking about more than 400 letters between the inmates, a lot of phone communications, a lot of income and outcomes of money, and even contacts in other countries, because in this case 3 of the members of the network were serving their sentences in United States prison. 3 of the members were serving their sentences because they were members of the group that attacked the World Trade Center in the year 1993. The response of the administration was the creation of monitoring and control groups, the classification of inmates in risk groups for surveillance, Group A for inmates that are in pretrial detention, or that who are serving their sentences for terrorist offenses. Group B for the recruiters, and Group C for population under radicalization risk. The control of contacts and activities within the prisons is the main task of these groups. But after almost 10 years, we can talk also about the weaknesses of the control system. The European handbooks about prevention of radicalization inside prisons talk about the external signs of radicalization as one of the main tools to detect and to prevent the behaviors, the radical behaviors inside prisons, and the creation of radical groups inside prisons. But these external signs are no longer valid to detect radicalization processes, because it is going to be very difficult to detect behaviors that are not hidden, because even the jihadist handbooks try to explain how to not to calm the attack of the attentions, and even explain how is the best way to recruit new members without to call the attention of the prison authorities. In this sense, the jihadist handbooks prefers or bet by individual dawah. The process of radicalization are going to be less visible, because we are going to maybe to detect processes in which are going to be involved maybe one or two inmates, maybe small groups or micro networks, and this is something that has been studied in France. The tendency in Spain and in France is that radicalization processes are going to involve two people, many small groups or micro networks. The current system is causing over-reporting problems, and recently the Danish Institute for Human Rights warned about the risks and that two alarmist reports about radicalization suppose for the inmates during the fulfillment of the sentences and after their release. Sometimes even is there a direct relationship between attacks and radicalization reports that are rising inside the prisons. The same tendency has been observed in Spain, where the judges that are in charge of the supervision of the inmates' rights have accepted the complaints of inmates about radicalization reports, and these judges are asking for more clear reasons to raise radicalization reports. The same tendency has been observed in England and Wales, and there is a report dated in 2016 that you can find in the House of Commons library. This suppose that the tools that we have been using during the last 10 or 15 years are going not to be valid, or at least are not going to be enough. So we have to bet on a criminal intelligence system in the penitentiary environment, and we must bet on the creation of a European penitentiary file that allows the information exchange between penitentiary systems. And that is because there is a 13 police cooperation networks in Europe, but there isn't a cooperation network in the field of prisons. And I am going to put you an example. For example, in the Spanish prisons are in pretrial detention or serving their sentences usually for drug traffic, a lot of citizens of France or Belgium. And when they are released, or even when they are transferred to France or to Belgium, the information that we have gathering here, it's not going to travel with them to their countries. And sometimes people who have police and penitentiary records in their countries enter in the Spanish prisons, and we don't have any kind of information about them. So it's very important maybe to think about the creation of a European penitentiary file, or even a penitentiary information exchange system between the European prison authorities. So to sum up, I think it is a very big mistake to base our monitoring system in tools that today are not going to work. We need to find new tools. Maybe we need to implement police and intelligence methods inside the prisons, because to continue by this path, it is going to suppose the stigmatization and the victimization of the inmates, because some in many times, and this is something that is often done, we are basing our reports in criteria that are loaded of ambiguity and subjectivity, and it is counterproductive. So it is time to implement new tools, and it's going to the time to find new ways in this sense. Thank you very much.